As Tehi introduced at the beginning, we have 3 entrepreneurs that are going to be sharing some stories about their search for go-to-market fit. Introductions again, Dominique Levin from WinningByDesign, consulting firm that works with a lot of companies on building their go-to-market, so she has a point of view of many, many companies. Have Jon Lee from Prosperworks, who has a high velocity sales model that is low touch. So I think that'll be an interesting part of this topic. And then Alon from Aptrinsic. Let's go ahead and kick off. So thank you guys for joining. Let's go and do a sort of a orientation here so that everybody can kind of get a sense for where you're coming from. So if I could ask each of you to really quickly just, what does your company do? And if I've already said most of it, you can just skip that. What type of sales model do you follow, if you know? And then who's your ideal customer profile? So if you look at what do you do, how do you sell, who do you sell to? That'll sort of level set, I think, for the folks in the audience, sort of where you're coming from so that the discussion from here on makes sense. Mickey, go ahead and start with you.
Sure. So Aptrinsic is my second company. My previous company was Insightera. As you mentioned, it was acquired by Marketo back then, so I can share both stories. So today, and I was fortunate to really work with John Miller back then and Phil Fernandez and learn about all this marketing-led go-to-market. I've started Aptrinsic from the sense that product-led go-to-market is a new thing, and I think that we need a platform for that. What we do in the company, we really help product teams to build, market, and grow their product, turning their product into a growth engine, as an essence. We believe that the product can be a very useful sales tools and even a marketing communication channel, if you will. The way we found go-to-market fit, and in that sense, we're selling to product management. So our platform helps them really get the product insights, and what we do with the analytics is really giving them the account, revenue, and usage so they can really take more informed decisions with regard to the roadmap. And with that, they can also engage their users with the same platform. We can really help them onboard the users and really drive their personalized journey inside the product. And the fact that we do both in the same platform really helps them to drive growth. And it's relevant for more, it can be marketing-led, product-led, or sales-led companies. With the sales-led companies, we help them in the further stage when they want to retain those customers.
So which model do you sell? How do you sell? Are you marketing-led, sales-led,
So we are
low touch?
Marketing-led that transitions to product-led. In that sense, this is how we sell today.
Got it. And who's typically the buyer?
The buyer is typically the product management, and then we expand sometimes to product growth. Depends on the company. If it's customer acquisition is the main thing, is the product growth. And if it's retention, we expand to customer success.
Got it. Great. Thanks, Mickey. Sure. John, how about you?
Yeah, so Prosperworks is my 4th company. I've been in everything since gaming, marketing automation, photo sharing. And so it's about 4 years old, and we are the #1 CRM for G Suite. We solve the biggest problem in CRM today, which is that, according to Forrester, 47% fail, and that's because of lack of adoption. And so we're backed by Google, we're used by Google, we're the only CRM that's recommended by Google. We have over 10,000 customers, and we've raised about $87 million in venture financing.
So you found go-to-market fit is what you're saying?
We hope so, yes. And so basically, we have 2 horizons in our business, right? So horizon 1 is basically focusing on companies that have 1 to 100 employees. And so our focus in there is we have a velocity business, which is 1 to 5, and then a core business, which is 6 to 100 employees. And so we have a completely...
So you have 2 different go-to-market playbooks?
We do. So we have basically a no-touch / low-touch for velocity, and then we've got a higher touch for the larger customers. And so we're 100% completely marketing-driven. We're an inbound company. 70% of our leads are organic, 30% are paid, and we've figured out basically a scalable, repeatable, and profitable sales model where we basically just keep adding reps so long as our magic number is over the 0.8 and our LTV to CAC is greater than 3. Horizon 2 for us is actually new. So it's kind of like a startup within Prosperworks itself. And so we're targeting mid-market customers as well as teams within enterprises. And so for that business, we're still trying to figure out our product market fit. We have product market fit across several verticals, but not horizontal like we do in the core business. And then we're experimenting with our go-to-market motion right now, which is 50% inbound as well as 50% outbound.
Got it. All right, this will be an interesting topic, which is later in companies' lives, you can have, as you're refining go-to-market fit, you can have multiple go-to-market playbooks. And I think this is a great example at that kind of scale. You've got a couple that are cooking and some that are experimental. So I think that'll be great. And Dominique.
All right, so as Bob mentioned, I'm currently running a company called WinningByDesign, which is I think of it as McKinsey for sales, and I'd say, scratch that because it's only 10% strategy and 90% execution, so probably more like Accenture maybe for sales.
Actually do stuff. I'm kidding.
Actually do stuff. I know, nuts and bolts. But I did have a life before this, so we're currently in, we have about 200 plus companies as customers. You need to have product market fit to become a WinningByDesign customer. So we go from sort of that early all the way to companies like Google Cloud, and Adobe Marketing Cloud are some of our larger customers. But before I did this, I actually was sort of a combination, I guess, of Bob and Tehi. I don't know. I was a CEO of a company called LogLogic, which we sold to TIBCO. And I also was a venture capitalist and sold $1 billion worth of companies as an investor. But the LogLogic story is sort of interesting. We'll maybe touch on it later in that it got me to where I am now. We were a sales-led company. We had an appliance. You absolutely had to sell to sales, talk to sales before you could even try it. But we were competing with a product-led company, head-to-head direct competitor called Splunk, which you may have heard of. And these two companies actually had an exit in the exact same week. And we had a good exit, a couple $100 million. So it was pretty good. Jin there in the room's laughing. He knows the story very well. But Splunk had an IPO in the exact same week. And we each had about 50 million in revenue and about 1,000 enterprise customers. If you don't know the story, dare to venture to guess the difference in valuation between these companies at exit, right? 20x. Right, 20x difference in valuation, same product, same market, same number of customers, same revenue, market timing, right? So go-to-market really, really, really matters. And since I was at the losing end of that battle, I dedicated the rest of my life to go-to-market.
That is terrific. All right. So maybe since Mickey, let's go circle back around to you. So, as you've been taking Aptrinsic to market, as you've been engaging with those early customers and winning these early deals, give us a little bit of a sense for the things you've tried to build your repeatable playbook, and maybe some things you tried that didn't work, which would be, I think, just as useful.
Sure. So, you're trying first really to meet the customers, so to really understand the pain point. We try different messaging, see what really sticks. And you also allow our SDRs to try that as well. See really what they help them really understand what the value. It's just different messaging, different angles to values, because as a platform or as analytics and engagement, you can do a lot of things. It's really hard to find what is really painful for them. So we've just met a few customers. When we closed the first 20 customers, we definitely wanted to make sure that also they use the product and what did they find very useful. Sometimes they go back to you and say, that is why I recommended you to that customer, because that feature is very important for us.
Oh, interesting. So were those your wows? Were those things that they were using? That's why I recommended you, was for that?
Exactly. And to your point back then, sometimes, first of all, to see that, visual things and the fact that they can see something like their product being suddenly personalized or onboarding to their product with our platform, it's always funny to see how visual is really impacting their emotional attachment to say, I can understand that. Second, wow, that we saw that product management today, they go to QBR meetings and they don't really have revenue to show. They show nice graphs, but nobody cares. So we kind of help them say, hey, you can actually attribute that kind of features to your.
Oh, interesting. So the why is the product manager gets to show up to a product review and tie revenue or activity to product capabilities.
To his engineering investment.
Was there stuff you tried that didn't work? Like you sort of look back to the early days, some experiments where you're like, we thought that was going to work, but it didn't work?
Sometimes you just go to a generic and that never works. You know, in previous company within Cytera, we tried to sell to the wrong person in the beginning, which didn't really own the budget. Or we got like very low sales that we were selling to salespeople, and then we understood that the marketing side would be the best fit. This time, I think it came from many years of the experience. I said, this is my buyer. I just need to understand what the real pain right now. And today, the recent thing we found, like they want to have the confidence when they launch something. So we also found the compelling event. Compelling event when you release something and you launch a new product or you release your next release. Suddenly, the VP of product is on the hook for adoption, So we really help them with that fact. Like we can really help them with data and engagement to really make that successful.
So how many folks in sales do you have right now? One. Okay, so you're sort of still in kind of Davy Crockett repeatability
right now,
mode.
we are hiring sales, by the way. So.
Okay, this is great. So you're literally at like Davy Crockett stage right now where you're finding the path of the woods, getting that early repeatability. Yeah. Okay, so let's shift to Jon and sort of contrast that. How many folks do you have in sales?
Probably about 75.
Okay, and how are they split between sort of your, well, I guess let's back up for a second, because I think, let's talk about your high velocity, zero touch sales motion, because that's kind of a different beast. It's something that's in vogue right now. Everybody wants to be like Twilio or Atlassian, SendGrid, because you can do, or more like Prosperworks.
Thank you.
So talk a little bit about, like, in order to do that, like, how did you have to gear the company? Because the common thing is go build a sales and marketing team to go do sales and marketing.
Right.
But if you're going to do zero touch, like, how did you have to gear the company differently at the beginning?
Yeah. So I could talk about how we got there.
Sure, that'd be great.
So number one is we had to build a great product. We're a product-led marketing company. Basically, if you use the product, you're much more likely to buy, and we use that as signals in order to prioritize our leads and distribute the leads to the sales reps. And so I basically went out and hired for skills. Like I was a gaming guy, I sold that company. I was a photo sharing guy, I sold that company. And then I was a SEM guy, I sold that company. So I knew nothing about SaaS. So I said, okay, well, how about I go poach one of the product designers from a competitor that I really respect? So I did that, and we built a great product. It was like 80% we had the table stakes, 20% we had the differentiators. On the marketing side, I recruited a CMO who ran all of online revenue for SMB at DocuSign. And we did all the easy stuff. So we basically listed ourselves in all the Google marketplaces. Google started taking interest in us. We started engaging in conversations. Now we have a partnership where they actually promote Prosperworks. And then we started doing some paid acquisition as well, where we basically just did rigorous testing in terms of how do we maximize volume and minimize cost to maximize overall profitability.
So when did you hire your first salesperson? Was it in the very beginning, or did you have sort of this zero-touch model cooking, and then you eventually sort of got around to
so
hiring
I actually started by hiring my first sales leader. And so I hired my VP of sales actually out of Demandforce, and he was a senior director.
How far along were you when you did that?
We had just launched the product.
Okay.
And so he basically knew how to sell SMB SaaS. And basically we ran his playbook, and we hired AEs, we hired SDRs, we had a roughly 1-to-1 ratio. And the goal wasn't necessarily to get everything efficient and right. The goal was to basically slam and try to sell every single customer that came our way. And the reason for that, it was really important to figure out what was the marketing message that would resonate with our customers. Did we have the right feature set? How did we engage with our customers while we were selling them? And were we successful in actually able to deliver on our promise over the long run by looking at the cohort health of the business? And then we hired, and then basically we then looked at the funnel, and we just optimized the hell out of that funnel. So like every single stage, we found all the bottlenecks, And then what we did is said, okay, here's our LTV to CAC, here's our magic number, and we just kept hiring sales reps while our magic number was greater than 0.8, and our LTV to CAC was greater than 3.
Okay, so you're not zero touch. You have sales reps that are talking to customers.
That's right. So
it's not like a total like Twilio, Atlassian, like no salespeople in the building model. You're like super light touch.
We're super light touch. Sales cycles 2 weeks. Average duration spent per customer is about 3.5 hours. So it's pretty high velocity.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So let's shift gears to this sort of ahas and wows. Like as you're out there working with these first customers you've been working with, like Mickey, you talked about sort of like some of the ahas and wows for you. Jon, let's go to you on sort of what were some of the ahas and wows for you as you were first like iterating with these customers and slamming to try and win as many customers as you can.
Right.
Like,
yeah, so from a product standpoint, we basically had our own analytics platform that we built, and we combined it with Mixpanel. And one of our magical moments in our product is that we're a zero-input CRM that connects right to your Gmail. So we can ingest all of the people you've been talking to, both in the meetings as well as emails. And when people discovered that and they added a contact, they're like, wow, so Prosperworks actually knows who are my most likely customers. And then when they add them as a contact, we've actually pre-filled all the data for you. And then when you go to the opportunity, you notice that all the emails and calendar events and text messages and video chats and intercom messages and all that gets automatically pulled into one spot. And we found that people who actually went through that cycle would actually convert at 3 times the rate that people who didn't actually discover that feature.
were there things you tried that didn't work? Like talk a little bit about stuff that didn't work in the early days.
So
like,
I'm like
go back and be like, whoa, yuck.
So I'm a math guy, and all my businesses have been all about like A/B testing and being super quant.
Good. We're going to go to A/B testing with Dominique in a second because this is
so what
very
didn't work was A/B testing scripts, right? A/B testing sales presentations. You know, every sales rep has their own style, and you know, it's just
so
hard.
You were finding the patterns by doing A/B testing.
But we were finding patterns by doing A/B testing. But we didn't really get conclusive results from it because every sales rep has their own personality. The way they build
so the A/B
rapport.
testing did not work.
It did not work.
That's kind of useful, huh?
At least when it came to scripts and it came to like, you know, because people were so, I think, unnatural trying to like follow a script, they weren't being themselves on the phone. And ultimately building that human connection, right? Which is why I think we will always have sales because human beings thrive for relationships. I mean, that's how we evolved, you know, as groups to help each other.
Okay. So actually, let's use this. So Dominique is actually a big fan of A/B testing and has used it successfully in a number of places. So where have you seen that work? And talk about sort of like how A/B testing can be used successfully to figure out these patterns in the go-to-market.
Right, I think Jon already gives a clue, right? He talks about, you know, scripts don't work, and I would agree with that. Right? It's not about scripts, but it's much more back to your whiteboard. Not your whiteboard. What's your sales guy's name again? Matt?
Oh, Mike Lee's whiteboard.
Mike.
Yeah, Mike Lee's whiteboard.
So we're going to talk a lot about Mike's whiteboard.
Mike's whiteboard, yes.
Because what do you put on that whiteboard? You don't put on there, you know, scripts. You put on there sort of key actions, right?
Yeah,
that
concepts and actions.
Right,
yeah.
concepts. So yes or no sending that test plan, right? Or yes or no showing a certain feature. Or yes or no having the person try the product before you talk about their business problem or whatever, right? So I think that's first of all important. But as long as we agree that that's what we're trying to figure out, then you can test that. But in order to be able to test, you do need to have add a couple numbers, I guess, to Mike's Mike, right? God, I forget that. Mike's whiteboard, which is like how many, right, opportunities or deals are in each of these stages. But then also, what's the conversion rate, right, from stage to stage, and what is the time that opportunities spend in each of these stages? Because all those are aspects of your revenue engine, right? And eventually you're going to try and optimize all of them. Now, I also have to say that of course, A/B testing works better if you have more numbers. And so the first thing that most companies will start to test is the top of the funnel. And in fact, you know, I know Storm has a company, Logic Hub. They started testing how to get first meetings. before they even had a product. So you can start some of that earlier, and sometimes
That's a really interesting thing, is you can test different sort of resonance points with customers before you even have a product, just using digital marketing.
Right, digital marketing, or in that case, they tried SDRs and so forth. And the reason that is so important, because
That's
earlier,
interesting.
like what goes wrong, like one of the things, like a common mistake I see founders make is that they think they can figure out go-to-market fit. And if, as a founder,
Let's repeat that.
All
One of
right.
the common mistakes we see is that founders think they can find go-to-market fit.
You cannot, by definition. As a founder, you are disqualified because you
Ouch.
Sorry. Because you are a founder, right, people respond to you completely different. You can get meetings with people just because you are a founder. Okay, so then that doesn't really help you, scale your sales team. So I think you, Jon,
Unless you
mentioned,
can clone yourself, right?
and I maybe hide and pretend you're you're going to
Yeah,
know the
totally
product,
agree.
you're going to know the market in a way that your first sales guy or gal is not, right? So you need David Crockett, so I agree with that. But the earlier you get David Crockett in, if nothing else, to help you figure out how to get meetings, if you're not the founder, right? So, and there the numbers are pretty high, right? You sometimes need to make hundreds of calls to get one stupid meeting. So you have a lot of data to actually start to test conversion rates. Like if I do 100 attempts on a VP marketing versus 100 attempts on a VP sales, do I see different conversion rates, etc. So yeah, no, I'm a big believer in actually adding those numbers on the whiteboard, and at least very early on in the top of the funnel, start to figure out if there's differences in approaching different people, using different messages, showing different features, all those things that were on Mike's board.
So
I would harmonize off of that as well.
Please, go
So
for it.
A/B testing definitely works. I think at the script level, it does not work in my experience. But for example, we're testing, SMS the customer before the demo, right? That works. We're testing, who are the people that should be in the room at the time of the
That's a
call.
really important part of the playbook that actually I don't think I did a good job talking about, which is at the top of each one of the stages, who's in the room. That's actually a really important thing to be explicit about, which is who exactly are you having this conversation with? Right.
And
that's a really important point. I'm glad you brought that up.
It's not just about A/B testing to see what the yield is at the end of the funnel. It's really finding what are all the correlating activities that your sales team needs to do that lead to that outcome, so that you get data earlier and you get a larger sample size. So as opposed to saying one closed, you're getting 1,000 calls as the data.
So you never really had founder selling, did you?
I sold very early on. I still sell.
I know, but you never had sort of the founder selling problem because you immediately went to a relatively high velocity digital marketing.
That's right. We went into a market where we knew that there was demand, and the moment that we fired up our listing in the G Suite marketplace,
that's interesting.
we
So you
started
never had sort of the founder selling
hundreds of
bug to get around.
customers. Yeah, exactly.
Now, Mickey,
Yes.
founder selling with +1 salesperson. How are you dealing with sort of unpacking this bias between you selling versus your one salesperson selling to find repeatability?
Yeah. So I'm not the one that gets the meetings. So the SDR gets the meetings, and they've been very successful. And we really tested different messaging, really something more generic, very personal. So I'm not the one that tries to get the meetings. And also I'm trying to come in the second meeting, because I realized that, if I'm going to the meeting, I might close the deal, but it's really fundamental to me to really scale my team and really to see how the dynamics work. So I think for me in Cytera, every deal I was in, we won, but we couldn't scale, and really pass that to others. So we couldn't clone ourselves. We were 2 founders. So to me, again, it's just really, and also being very open about what didn't work. When we lose something, have the culture to say, hey, we weren't good enough, or the pain point, or other things didn't work, and to really.
What's an example of something that didn't work, another one of those for you? Because I think that's super relevant for the team out here. Like, what didn't work?
By definition, when you experiment, half of it at least should not work.
Right.
So, you try different angles that didn't work, and sometimes it just go dark on you, and you need to figure out why, And obviously, we did some mistakes in the past when we demo the product and we train you. We're going to kill you 45 minutes showing you the entire feature set. And I'm seeing that very often. When I get demos, I know that now they're going to go and show me each capability. And then if I ask something, then they drill down forever. And I'm trying to even teach my team, try not to do it. We love the product. Every team really likes the product. Don't train your pool customer in the first demo. It's not a training session. It's value. Show them value.
Important.
Try not to touch the screen too much. We go like, and now my sales guy is really super technical as well and really knows how to articulate the product, but also is very knowledgeable. So he's also careful now not to go too deep into the product. So going deep into the product never works. I think it's just something that overwhelmed the user. And he as you said, choose the 3 things. When we sell too much value, it's just too much.
You can't say too much. Let me talk about the 27 awesome things my product can do. Which one are you interested in?
Exactly.
So there's actually a very interesting difference as you talk about founder selling between the two of them. I don't know, maybe worthwhile pointing out, because you talk a lot about product-led, right, versus sales-led, et cetera. And someone was asking, is that because of deal size? But if you look at these two guys, right, Mickey's company is creating a new category, basically, right? So,
this is a great point.
Right. So I think you have to sort of zoom in, and it goes back to what you said earlier on, like, how is the customer buy? It's not just what are the decision-making units, but does the customer realize that they have a problem? And if you're creating a new category, right, people are not going to be out there on Google like looking for your product. So that's why Mickey wrote a book, right? And that's one of the ways that you can do thought leadership. I guess Jon, on the other hand, right, it's much more mature category, CRM, right? People know what a CRM is, but everybody hates their CRM, and so they're looking for a better CRM. I might be looking online, like, hey, is there a CRM that doesn't suck, that actually has good reviews? But that's a very different. I know that I have a problem. I know I need a CRM. I go looking for it proactively. So it just builds on what you said earlier. But there's a fundamental difference in the nature of their markets that is important, and why it is they're going to market different as well.
I think in both of them, the product positioning is always a challenge. Like they always try to categorize me. Oh, you guys are like Walk Me. You guys are like this or that or Amplitude or. And
it's tough to create a new category.
Yeah, you need to position it well enough and really work with marketing as well in that sense. Otherwise, you're just going to be boxed somewhere, and then they're going to compare you with an irrelevant platform.
Okay, we're going to wrap up this session shortly. I think probably 1 or 2 more questions here. Jon, given that your team is the furthest along, one of the things I think would be useful to hear is you found go-to-market fit. You've got 70 salespeople. You got playbooks you're cranking on. Like, how did finding go-to-market fit change the company? Like, what did it feel like? What happened once you found it? And then the follow-up question to that is, now that you've got this experimental new thing you're running right now, how are you sort of dealing with both of those at the same time?
Yeah. So once we found go-to-market fit, it was just a mathematical equation, right? You just add more reps. Okay, it's efficient. Magic
Investors
numbers.
love that right there. Did you hear that? Mathematical, stick more in, more comes out.
Exactly. So we just keep doing that, right? And we keep growing our lead volume. I think, but what happens when the company gets to like 20 sales reps, to 40 sales reps, to 60 reps, to 80 reps, right? Culture becomes the actual single most important thing that you have to focus on.
Excellent topic.
And so basically what we've done is a few things. Number one, we've created very clear promotion paths for everybody. So 75% of our sales reps are actually hired at the SDR level, which is the most junior level on the sales team. They get promoted to senior SDR, then associate AE, then AE, senior AE, then mid-market AE, or a manager. And so those promotions can happen as little as 6 months. And so you basically have these folks who are super hungry, and they see the future of being able to accelerate their careers at Prosperworks. So that's number one, is creating that. Number two is creating really a team-based winning culture, right? It's all about the team number. And it's all about being perfect for N months or 17 months or whatever it is. And so that creates this sort of good pressure, bad pressure around we don't want to let the team down. And by the way, we make it completely transparent how everybody is doing on their goals, both in terms of the sales outcomes of how much GNMRR you're driving, as well as the activities that we all agree and we know that are correlated to success. And so now we're trying to create basically a system which also includes testing and measurement, taking risks, right? And we reward people for taking risks on trying different methodologies and proving that it's actually increasing the overall throughput of the sales funnel. And so I think that that is the single thing that we focused on, is now that we have the system, how do we get more out of the system so that it's not the founder or me who's determining what plays we run, but that the sales team themselves create a culture of continuous improvement and continuous desire to win and advance in their careers.
How did it change the rest of the company? So that was how you changed the sales team once you found go-to-market fit. What did it do to the rest of the company?
Yeah, it was actually kind of rough because you had PEQ or
So
product
you said
engineering.
it was kind of rough?
Yeah, it was a little rough because you have product engineering and QA on one side. Then you've got sales on the other. Sales people are getting promoted all the time. There's music blasting. People are being celebrated. They're drinking nonstop.
Shots, closing deals,
et cetera. And then you have product engineering, which worked on a much slower cadence, right? And so we had this sort of challenge. Well, people in sales get promoted so quickly. Like, how come in engineering we don't see that same sort of mentality? So that's still a challenge that we struggle with. But I think overall, I mean, the company, what I try to do is like, okay, well, here's our goal. We want to bring prosperity to the world. What's the best way to measure that? It's ARR, because that means more companies, more people are being affected by our product. And so if you're building great product, that's ultimately driving more customers. More customers means more opportunities to drive productivity for them, which then translates into revenue. We're all a part of that. And so we celebrate, basically these wins as a team.
Yeah, that's a tough thing that when go-to-market fit happens, all of a sudden now the balance of culture between a product-led culture and the go-to-market team, and why are salespeople making all this money? Because they won deals. Engineers don't make more money when you win deals. Like, that's a real thing. Like, if you haven't been through it, like, get ready for it, and it's real. And the good news is it's totally normal, and pretty much every company goes through it, but just expect it. Yeah. And it's one of those things where I've yet to hear sort of a great answer to how to navigate through it. You just kind of have to work on creating a balanced culture where both are valued.
Yeah,
but it's hard.
But what we do is one of our values is be ambitious, right? And I think the sales team, because they're so ambitious, it actually sets a higher bar for everybody else. So I hear it all the time. It's like, damn, those sales guys like work all the time and they're just crushing their number. And that creates an internal overall pressure for success across the organization.
Fascinating. Okay.
If you tie also the engineering to the customers, they care about recognition, not as much about the money, I think. So creating that recognition that they wrote the code, that someone is using it, like there's a logo they recognize. You could see that their commitment level goes up, and it's really important just to get recognition happening. That really helps in that sense.
Great point. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to open it up for 2 questions from the audience. If anybody has questions for any one of the panelists, who's going to be the brave first soul? So you're going to need to shout out just so everybody in the room can hear you, because maybe we have a mic to hand out. Oh, wow, look at that. A microphone appears.
I'm a big fan of the A/B testing, and it's a big challenge on how to get salespeople, to change their behavior based upon whether you randomly put them in one bucket or the other. How do you technically do that, whether it's an offer? Scripts, I understand, very difficult, but even you're allowed to give this offer, you're not. Once it starts to work, guess what? They all jump over and try to offer it themselves. I mean,
Dominique, you want to take the one since you work with probably the most
companies?
companies?
I mean, I think it starts with how do you actually get to follow, any kind of script. I mean, Winning by Design, it's interesting. We have 8 offices overseas. We're growing overseas a lot faster than we are here because we're preaching sales as a science. And guess what? Most Americans don't really like following, any kind of science in sales. We're still in the Wild West and rock stars and whatever, cowboys. But anyway, so I don't. So how do we actually get salespeople to follow a script? We find that so you can't manage what you can't measure, I guess. We do a lot. We recommend you do call recordings, and there's this concept of a bingo card, which is really just like that whiteboard again, right, with the key actions. and then you listen to calls afterwards and see if people, how many of the bingo, boxes can you check off?
Oh, so bingo, like bingo phrases that pay kind of thing?
Yep,
Okay.
that's right. Well,
Right.
it could be bingo phrases or actions, like
Okay.
did you or did you not?
So it's not as much about getting them to do things differently, but by observing what they're doing differently.
No, it is getting them to do things too, but you can't get them to do things if you don't check what they're doing.
Okay.
One person to do one thing, another to do something else beside each other?
Yeah, you can. Right, and I think the other thing is there's a huge cultural shift going on here, right? Again, we're going from what was an individual contributor culture. Okay, let me back up for a second. We're going from a culture where 20% of your salespeople bring in 80% of your revenue. And they have their formula, and they all sort of compete against each other. And if I go home with the big commission check, that means that Bob ain't getting that money. Ha, 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 ha. Right? So now I'm going to a different culture. For most of you, you're not, unless you're doing $20 million deals, right? If you're doing $10,000, $50,000 deals, you need to have 80% of your salespeople bring in 80% of your revenue. Right? Everybody needs to hit quota for you to make your numbers eventually. Well, that's where we're going to, right? So that means that I need a system, I need a process. And now suddenly the whole culture changes too, where if I contribute to make the system better, then everybody benefits. Right? And we're seeing this with SDR teams, it works very well, right? Most SDR teams, even baby companies with just one SDR, will deploy a sales automation tool, right? A tool like Outreach or SalesLoft or what have you, where you actually have a formula, like it takes you how many calls and what combination of calls and emails and LinkedIn touches to get to a meeting. And these teams are constantly collaborating to test things out because they understand that that's how they'll make the system better, and that's how they will benefit and get bigger commission checks, etc. But there is definitely, it's a complete, not to underestimate.
That's a really interesting macro point
cultural,
about sort of the
shift.
individual reps valuing the overall system as part of their ability to get their job done versus sort of hero selling as individual athletes.
So most of
That's interesting.
In the SDR side,
I
I
hadn't
would
thought
say,
about
and maybe also because millennials, think about it, when I graduated, I did my own thesis. Now everybody graduates, you do it as a group project, right? So I think there is even a cultural, societal shift, right, towards teamwork. So I think often the young sales reps actually are a lot better than that experienced rep you bring in from the outside who's still stuck in the hero selling mode. Anyway, that's a whole different.
Great. All right. Last question over there.
Hi, yeah, I guess you
No
can hear
pressure.
me.
Better be
All
a good
right,
question.
this is Bruno from AtScale. You talked a lot about internal efficiencies and how you can make your own company better, and you talked about a little bit about category. But you haven't talked about external pressure, maybe things externally that are levers of growth. I'm thinking particularly this might be for Jon. You're in an existing category. The big guy in your space is Salesforce. So how much of that is a factor on how you can grow your company on focusing on what the competition doesn't offer?
Yeah, so so from a sales and a marketing standpoint, we're very clear on how we're different. So again, like for the way I sort of approach enterprise software is that you've got to have 80% focus on the table stakes, because for us, we're an existing category, right? People are used to doing things a certain way, but we design it and we approach it differently with zero input, better user experience. And then 20% is really focused on differentiators. And we really market those differentiators to the core pain points that we hear from our Salesforce customers. And so about 40% of our net new ARR is from customers that are ripping Salesforce out.
Wow.
And so it's not a secret. Salesforce churns anywhere from 3 to 6% of $12 billion, right? So that's $360 million and spent up for grabs. So we do that from a differentiation standpoint. We hijack press releases from time to time. So Salesforce announced Essentials, which was like their SMB product. And basically, we stayed in front of the press, and Sal Rodriguez from Reuters wrote about it. It's like, but there's also better CRMs that are out there, like Prosperworks, right? So we were able to basically do a little judo on that one, which was great. And then we also have videos that basically show you, this is your life on Salesforce, this is your life on Prosperworks. and it takes you 7 minutes to like add a contact or an opportunity here, it takes you 10 seconds to do it with Prosperworks, right? So there's all sorts of things, and it actually benefits not just explaining why it's different or better, but you also start peer positioning yourself with Salesforce, right? And you kind of get some of that brand equity by saying like, they are who you compete with, even though we really don't, right? Like in the small business, like they are huge in enterprise, we're not there, but it actually helps you peer position, elevate your sort of brand standing, so to speak.
But John, how
on
does
the market.
how does Google factor into that too? Because in go-to-market fit, like getting the flywheel going, sometimes there's a key partner that can be part of the playbook. Like,
That's
how does
right.
that factor in for you guys?
Yeah, so it's huge, right? So it's a very simple message. We are the #1 CRM for G Suite, and the only CRM that Google recommends. It's not Salesforce, it's not HubSpot, it's not a Sugar CRM. And so we've built basically the deepest integration with Google, and we're the most googly, which is why they focus with us.
Yeah, don't underestimate the value of being able to hitch a ride on somebody else's coattails. You can waste a lot of energy doing that, but this is a great example where that's been a pretty significant turbocharger for you as part of building your go-to-market flywheel.
Yeah.
Great. So panelists, thank you. Audience, thank you. And we're going to shift gears to the next session. Let's give these guys a hand.